Teal MPs are pushing for the government to implement more ambitious climate targets. The Independents are pushing for Labor to adopt a 75% emissions target by 2035. Joining me live now is Independent MP Kylea Tink. Thank you for your time. Getting sort of ahead of when this is being locked in, what's 75% based on?
It's based on the science, Tom. So when you listen to both the international science and our local science community, they're telling us really clearly we need to get to net zero as quickly as possible. In Australia, we now have a net zero target by 2050, but to be able to achieve that, we need to have very clear milestone targets between 2030 and 2050. There's no point leaving all the heavy lifting to the last 5 to 10 years. So I've talked with a number of people across the industry, both those that are involved in the generation of emissions and those who are working really hard to abate them. And there is a general consensus that if the right target is set, each sector will work towards getting themselves there as quickly as possible.
Have you sort of briefing though from, say, a government department, because I appreciate you speaking to people in the industry that know what they're talking about, but to understand if you're setting a target by 2035, what does 75% mean? What would 70? What would 65? What would 80 mean in terms of the impact on various industries, the economy and individuals as well?
There's a lot of people that are much smarter to me that are much more closely involved in each of these industries that will be doing exactly that sort of modelling, Tom. I think what's really important for us all to appreciate is that not every sector is going to move at the same rate. So an industry like the cement industry, for example, here in Australia is going to be very difficult to abate. For that reason, we need other industry sectors, say transport, for example, to be moving further faster so we can create a little bit of wiggle room for those industries that are going to find it harder. What we do know is that initially all the science had told us that we should be aiming for a target of 50% emissions reductions by 2030. The Australian government didn't choose to take on that target. Instead, they set a lower target of 43%, but importantly, they set it as a floor, not a ceiling. So that means there is still upside in us through to 2030. Once momentum builds, momentum begets momentum. And so in theory, the next 25% beyond that 2030 target should be far easier to convert. The final 10% is always going to be the hardest. So that's where we need to leave the most room. So it's why it's important we have an ambitious 2035 target, not just something that leaves us an insipid target.
The polling on this suggests Australians are concerned about climate change and want action, but once they're asked to pay, the willingness to do so to get there wanes. Do we need something reliable released on that? A bit more of a roadmap than we had last time to outline not just, oh, it won't cost you anything, but, this might cost more, whether it be electricity or whatever else. This could be a bit cheaper and actually put some meat on the bones there to have any confidence with people if they're going to support this?
Tom, I think a roadmap is exactly what Australians need, and it's exactly what we're asking for. We want to understand the transition plan for our economy and our society, because none of us are anymore under any disillusion that we're not going to have to transition both our economy and our society. What I find particularly interesting in this space, though, at the moment is we are all feeling cost of living pressure. We are all struggling to face into our energy bills, to go to the grocery shops and buy our groceries. And in many ways, some of the lowest hanging fruit in this space is stuff that would make living cheaper for all of us. So there is nothing cheaper than energy that's coming directly from your roof, from a solar cell, into your power points. Yet we have social housing and affordable housing around this country that doesn't already have that as a mandate. And we're still not mandating that all new builds should include solar energy on the roof. So there are really easy things to do. The other one that I've talked about now from before I was even elected is transport emissions and fuel efficiency. We currently have some of the dirtiest petrol in the world. It runs inefficiently. It costs so much more money because it runs so efficiently. We're getting some cleaner petrol, but even more importantly, we need to move forward in promoting active transport in urban centres like mine in North Sydney. But we need to make sure that regional and rural communities have cleaner petrol that'll cost them less because it'll run for longer.
So the talk of what will be, the cheapest element, there's a lot of analysts suggesting that ultimately, if we have renewables down the track, they can be cheaper, but there could be a cost in that transition. When Labor made this promise before the election to take off $275 off your power bill by 2025, is that going to damage the cause? Because I haven't spoken to anyone who thinks that's on track now. Is that going to make people say, we're told this is cheaper, we don't believe it?
Look, I think that this is what's wrong with two-party politics, and this is what we've seen taking place in politics over the last 3 or 4 decades. We hear these promises that are made during an election campaign. They sound great in the moment, but then when it comes to actually delivering them, we're often left wondering when we're going to see them. So I'm not part of the Labor Party. I don't know how they came to making that promise. I think, the promise I made to my community is that we would work together to get our community to net zero emissions as quickly as possible. And
so on that, though, whatever roadmap you're advocating, it's important to be upfront. If there's a cost to that, people need to be told about that and then be willing to say, yeah, we'll pay that.
I think it's important that the costs are expressed and that people are aware of them. And then I think it's also important that we work to ensure the most vulnerable within our community are looked after. So that's why those that are in social housing, that are in affordable housing, we should be prioritising improving the efficiency of their buildings and also improving their access to renewable and sustainable energy. It's the same when it comes to transport.
Okay.
We need to make sure that we're getting cleaner stuff to the people who need it most quickly.